So first of all, welcome, Jared Scott, director of The Great Green Wall. Thank you for sharing some time with us. This is the Q&A of the film. It will be pre-recorded and then available for all the viewers of the film because the film is going to be online. So I noticed that the film is a triumph of optimism in a way, in a fight that it's otherwise overwhelming because climate change is looming over us and it's scary. But this little film is a gem and suggests that there might be a light at the end of the tunnel. So what is the spirit of the film and why make it now?
Sure. I mean, I think that we wanted to tell both a cautionary tale, a cautionary climate change tale, but also have this vision of hope. Now, for the climate crisis writ large, I don't think there's a light at the end of the tunnel, unfortunately. But I think for for trying to build a more resilient future in the African Sahel, I think there is. I think what it teaches us is, I think we have to think big. We have to be ambitious. I mean, this is a bold, ambitious initiative. It's this mad ambition, really, just like it is, I think, for the world to stay below the 1.5 or 2 degrees Celsius warming target. We have 7 years to do that. The odds of us doing that are basically 0% right now. That's why you have Fridays for Future out there in the street every Friday and beyond. We have to radically change what it is that we're doing. So, I think that it's one thing to be optimistic, but I think it has to be a mature sense of hope. I think what it comes down to for me, and I don't know if this answers your question, but where my thinking is right now, it relates a lot to the writer Jonathan Safran Foer, where it's not that we're doomed and it's not that we're going to be okay. It's kind of both, or it's kind of neither. I mean, it depends what we do, right? We're not doomed, but we're not going to be okay. And it all depends on what we do. It all depends on the decisions we make. So I think the Great Green Wall can be a litmus test for this grand reforestation project. But, we have to, there's no silver bullet here. I mean, we can't have massive reforestation at the same time have massive deforestation. Globally, that's not going to work out. We need to really plow ahead with an all the above strategy. So it's optimistic for me, though, when I see people at work. I'm optimistic when I roll up my sleeves and I can do some work, and usually that's through the act of filming. But I think as it relates to our film, yeah, it's optimistic in that here's a African-led project. And of course, for me, it's more an open source movement. We have governments and institutions, we have, private companies, we have NGOs, we have, really an all the above strategy. I mean, I'd like to see as many people come into the tent and see this Great Green Wall realized, hopefully that it doesn't get bogged down with bureaucracy, but instead gets buoyed by it, that it doesn't get stuck from the ambition, but it gets propelled by it, that this can truly become a global movement.
But do you feel the film will make it a bit of a difference? Because if people watch it, they somehow will be more sensitive to I don't know, to
sure.
Yeah,
I mean,
to the climate change problem.
Yeah, I think that if I was an organizer, I'd want action items, right? And I think that's where I mentioned all those aforementioned groups. The movement that needs to grow this wall. But as a filmmaker, I think our charge is to really get it out in the public imagination. To inject this into the information bloodstream of the world, to raise awareness, and hopefully that this film can, it's not a technical film, it's an inspirational film. It's a film that follows an emoja. It's supposed to be an emotional journey. And, hopefully that this story, and it's not just relevant today as it was a year ago and as it will be, 5 years ago. I think this is a timeless story. And I guess therein also lies the problem. I think we're going to be in this situation for years to come. Unless we work really, really hard, unless we make unprecedented changes, we won't see that light at the end of the tunnel, as you say.
But what also Sarah McDonald was saying, and agreeing with you in this sense, is that at this stage, we all know what the problem is, but having some kind of source of inspiration can make a difference. I mean, can make you feel empowered or not. Can we actually change things? Can we, I mean, people are trying to move things around in Africa, and the Great Green Wall is a proof of that. And that's inspiring. So one of the questions that many people, many of the members of the audience would ask us is, how can we help? And in a way, this film is a very strong impulse to act, because something can be done. Something somewhere is being done, and you can be part of the movement. So I thought that this was the very strong element of the film. And then you have another very strong element, which I think is worth noticing, because it's quite a unique take, in the sense that Ina Modia is somehow the lead narrator, and she's beautiful. She's a talented musician. She's an activist. She is from Mali. So you've chosen a unique point of view to tell your story. Why choose a musician?
Sure. I think, well, projects become, end up having minds of their own. And, I think at the end of the day, we all serve the project. So I think it's more that the project all chose the team in some way. I mean, when I came on board, Ina was already talking about making this journey. And so I got together with her and we discussed how to embrace music and how to use that as a storytelling device. She's not an expert. She's not coming there as an outside interviewer. I think the whole idea was to have this told from an African perspective and have all the characters, have it really be African led, because the project itself is African led. And you see that in just the way that we decided to film it. It's all this single camera. It's all handheld. It's all very intimate. And the eye line of everybody is it's on the same level, that we're not coming there to interview people as experts and then have other people as case studies. That there was an equality in the way that we decided to film it. I mean, music it's a great way to tell stories. I mean, it's a uniquely it's unique in Africa in terms of rites of passage or marriage or birth, or it's wrapped up in the oral tradition. And I think for us to try to make climate, to tell a different story that involved this story of hope as well as this cautionary tale. I mean, music was a fantastic thing to do. I mean, it's how Ina expresses herself. It's how she communicates with the world. It's how it's a part of there's that visual diary throughout, or that inner diary, that when Ina is sharing with the audience what she's going through, and music is another expression of that. And so it just made sense to be able to see to experience an issue and then to process that through music, and hopefully make it a little more entertaining and engaging for the audience.
That's great. Yes, and it's also what Sarah mentioned. So you had a very interesting concept, but then how do you tell a story about that? Because obviously, climate change is good for news headlines, but to make a story and to make a documentary that is not boring, you needed a different angle, and you achieved that, because it's a very taking and emotional film, also thanks to the music. So one of the big names involved in the film is Fernando Meirelles, director of The City of God and The Constant Gardener. And he was one of the executive producers in the film. So what was his involvement and how was it working with him?
Yeah, Fernando, it was a delight to work with Fernando. And, we were incredibly fortunate to have someone of that caliber, both in terms of the filmmaking world and the industry, but also how passionate he is. He's a firm believer in, he's been a long time tree planter and regreener, and recognizes the importance of carbon sequestration and the multi-benefit aspects of forests and vegetation. And so, I think him as both a teacher in the industry and a inspirational guide when it comes to his guiding, philosophy and how he lives his life, it really propelled the project forward. It gave us a lot of energy. It helped, he, like so many people in the film, are, we all become a team. It's an orchestra. I think oftentimes the director is the conductor of that orchestra, but really it's an orchestra. We all have a part to play, and all of the musicians, all of the people in the film, or that make the film, the filmmakers, it creates that song in the end, which is the film that you see. And it would be different if there was, if I was working with 20 different people, but it just so happened we were the group that we were, and Fernando was a huge part of that. And I'm greatly in debt to what he was able to bring to the project.
And then you say about the orchestra, and I was thinking part of this big orchestra is the community also that you get in touch with, and the characters that Ina speaks with throughout her journey. Obviously, I think she must have been an important liaison also with the rest of the characters appearing in the documentary. But I was wondering, what is your personal take? How did you make the relationship with the communities and the other characters in the film work? How long was the filming? Was it hard to get in touch with them? Were they happy to talk to you?
Sure. I think like a lot of projects, you plan, and then you show up and you have to, you're planning what becomes indispensable, but you have to kind of pivot. And, there were some people that we thought would be in the movie that weren't, and there's some people that we didn't think were going to be in the film, and they ended up being, these delightful characters. So, and as anyone who's made a film can tell you, it's always better to be on the ground, so it's always better to go and do a location scout beforehand, or to go on a recce and to meet people, because sometimes when you're filming, you're racing against the light. You only have 10 hours or 12 hours that day. You have to travel, you have to eat, it wasn't like we were, we were often, we would fly into, the beginning into Senegal, but then it was really trying to hopscotch our way across, and that was time consuming. And so, the people, you have to earn their trust. You have to try to nurture those relationships, but then also turn around and film. And ideally you're nurturing and filming, because you want that, I always like to see that relationship that Ina's having with the characters happen for the audience as well. Because sometimes if you go and you spend too much time with somebody, they've kind of told you everything, and then you have to come back the next day and say, oh no, can we talk about that thing again? But it's like, oh, I already told you. There's kind of this, feeling of already expressing oneself. So it's kind of nice to, I think Ina has that artfulness where, she's able to establish those relationships, really as we're filming, because you want that to be, you want that to be organic. You want it to feel as if the audience is there, that this hasn't been too premeditated. But of course you have to contact people ahead of time and set up a time to meet, and hopefully that works out. And we had some beautiful surprises, some happy accidents, and then some things that were really thoughtfully planned in advance. So it was kind of a combination of everything.
It's a fine balance, isn't it?
It is.
It's filmmaking, I guess.
It's filmmaking. Yeah. Yeah, but we were fortunate enough, though. Also sometimes filmmaking, you kind of go. It's done piecemeal. You might do something. Sometimes you hopscotch it with the edit. Sometimes But we were able to actually get principal photography to be mostly done at the same time. Really at the to film and then go into the edit, which is really a treat. But I think it ended up being about 8 weeks that we were out there on the road, and it made sense.
And then editing at the same time.
No, we weren't doing that. I'm saying that some films do that. I think we had the luxury of of actually finishing principal photography and then going and editing. So we really filmed the way the film feels, which is we were on the road. It was it very much, there's a quest narrative there. There's a hero's journey narrative there. There's a road trip narrative, and we were road tripping, so it made sense. I think that a lot of the feelings and the experience off camera comes across on camera as well.
That's very true. And I also discussed something else with Sarah. She actually mentioned it, and it made me think, because there's a complexity in the film, the complexity of an African story being told by a white filmmaker.
Mm.
And so she had that as a, not as an issue, but like as a matter of concern, obviously, because
Hmm.
it's a story that is deeply African, told by obviously Ina Modia and the communities that get together, and by a very talented white filmmaker.
Mm.
So did you feel a responsibility towards that? Was it challenging? Or how did you put yourself into the project? How did you see yourself into the project? Because
Yeah.
obviously the concern could have been, at least for Sarah, and I do share that, like, could we create something patronizing?
Hmm. Hmm.
How did
Yeah,
you do that?
look, I mean, it wasn't, I wasn't tone deaf to that. At the beginning, I actually remember calling a producer friend in the industry and said, "Hey, I'm working on this project. I'm really excited about it." And she was kind of said that very same thing. She's like, "Are you sure are you the right person to direct this?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I've thought a lot about that. I mean, I'm the only American on the project. Yeah, and I'm a white straight American male. Am I the right person to be telling the story?" And then I was in Paris, and I was at the time, and I went and met with Ina and just kind of put that on the table and said, "Hey, how do you feel about, you know,
Me.
me as a white male coming in and directing
Yeah.
this film?" And she kind of said, "Look, I just want to see this film, told in a way that touches people. You've done a lot of environmental films." And, I like basically gave me her blessing, and that was important. And I think once we did that, and fair enough, I totally, I was my own critic, worst critic when it came to that. But I mean, ultimately, it was a story that I was very passionate about. I wanted to help tell it. And I think, though, what it forced me to do was to become a listener. At the beginning, I really tried to listen a lot to Ina, understand what's most important to her, and to really listen to read a lot, to ingest this, to try to be more of a sponge, as opposed to form, really hard ideas about how things should be. Um, and I think that maybe the development process was a bit longer for me to process that, and to try to figure out, to check myself, to figure out, am I, to make sure that I'm not trying to put forth, my values, or, we're all in a way limited by the microcosm, which is our own personal experience. And can I expand my perspective? Can I try to see the story through some of these other ideas? But at the end of the day, I also am a filmmaker, and there's certain storytelling techniques and ways of trying to, filmmaking ends up being a process of subtraction. You're not, you don't try to put a bunch of, you don't try to throw everything in there. You try to distill everything down to its essence. So I think after the process of listening, I mean, same on the ground. I mean, ultimately, I think maybe the best way to see myself in this film is more of a messenger, more of like a conduit, more of a, like, someone who is interpreting something, but not, but listening a lot.
And you can tell that. I mean, stories that when you make it then universal, and you add a different angle also, rather than an internal person. So well done.
Well,
uh,
and if you obviously, if you watch, I mean, if your audience has seen the film, I mean, it's the idea was to embrace Inamoja and to see it through Ina's eyes. And I mean, every character, it is all conversation oriented. There was no interviews, so it wasn't like I was all of a sudden interviewing people off camera. Of
mm,
course, I was actively involved on the ground, to help guide, the film. But that's my job. It's to guide it, but not to overstep. And you know, it is all conversation oriented, which is actually a tough film to make. It's not like there are these interviews you can come back to. Ina had her inner journey that she took us along. But once we would go to Senegal, we'd film Senegal, and then once we went to Mali, we filmed Mali. So sometimes someone might have a great idea in Mali where you're like, oh, that's kind of an idea you'd like to see at the end of the film. But
mhm.
in the way that we structured it, you had
Was
to
the film.
experience that at a certain time on the arc. So we really had to embrace the road trip, story structure, which was quite interesting because, you have to kind of know what it is that you're going to cover in those areas. So there's an emotional arc, there's that character arc, there's that, insight arc. You have to kind of line all those up, which was a challenge.
And then the film is also shot very well in the sense that it's been nominated for best cinematography at Raindance. How was it working with Tim Gregg, your DOP? How the collaboration went?
I mean, the whole team on the ground was fantastic. I mean, Tim Craig, Hugh Campbell, Ads Prescott, Charlie Feldman. I mean, it was a collective effort. But Tim, yeah, I mean, Tim's a rock star. As you know, he had just come off doing Three Identical Strangers, and he's recently had a number of great films come out, or series like Fear City, and he's a powerhouse. But I think what we decided to do, which was really exciting in this film, was, and I kind of alluded to it early, is to not make it too slick. I think anymore there's a lot of films, people can get their hands on, all sorts of gimbals and dollies and steady cams. And I think we wanted this to feel real. We really decided, we made a concerted effort to shoot everything handheld. The whole film is handheld, which was really tiring, I think, for Tim at times, but also really rewarding because we got the feeling that we were looking for. And Tim's like a former dancer, and he kind of glides around and moves with the camera in this beautiful way. And I think that poetically matched Ina as well, in her fluid movements, in the studio, and kind of the way she carries herself, but we wanted it to feel real. I just didn't want it to feel like it was too smooth, that it was too produced on the ground, and so, and again, I think that eye line was really was really thought out. Like, how do we make sure that we're not intruding, that, as you mentioned earlier, even the camera doesn't feel patronizing, that we come and that we're meeting people at their level, on their turf, on their own terms. And how do we use the camera to reflect that? And then, of course, how does that camera, how do we get, that intimacy with Ina, on the road? We wanted to feel like, you were really spending a lot of time with her on the road, as she does when she tours, as one would do in this, as we did in the film, but to get that sense of reflection. But yeah, Tim was a rock star, and I think that, ultimately we ended up making it feel kind of like it had that narrative, storytelling quality, without it being too, without having these kind of moments of artifice that you sometimes see in documentary films.
Great, thank you for that. One last question. You've been dealing with environmental films. What's your next project? And is the team going to be the same, or are you looking to something completely different?
Well, my next project, I've had to sign an oath of non-disclosure, and so I can't tell you anything. No, but I'm going to continue to try to make films that impact and change minds, and I have a few environmental projects, that are on the horizon, and a few other ones. So hopefully, yeah, you'll see some more from me sooner than later. If we can just navigate this current pandemic, which is making it a little challenging for us to go film the way that we would maybe typically film. So I'm having to adjust, like so many other filmmakers. And look, I mean, a lot of people are getting hit in all sorts of ways. And this has been a really difficult time on so many people. And I'm quite privileged that I still have the ability to kind of, reimagine some things, but still push forward on some projects. So I'm really grateful and privileged on that front. But yeah, I hope we can navigate this pandemic and still tell great stories, and hopefully we can get people, the one thing about film festivals that I always like is these offline experiences.
I hope you will keep us posted on your next projects once they're done and the non-disclosure agreement won't be applicable anymore.
Yeah.
But best of luck with everything.
Sounds good.
Hopefully our path will cross again soon in a more personal way, because this festival obviously is online because we didn't have any other options. Sure. But it loses a bit of the charm of getting the talents in London and see them and
Of course,
and have, you know, a physical chat with the audience as well.
Absolutely.
So hopefully we'll be able to do that soon on your next projects. So thank
Likewise.
you very much.
Yeah, and thanks again for the
nomination.
You know, fingers crossed that
Well deserved. Well deserved.
that you know, that works out.
Okay. Best of luck with everything.
Thanks so
And
much. You too.
hopefully speak soon.
Beautiful.
Bye, Jared.